I have, in addition to negotiating the Abraham Accords, I like to say it that way because the real people, that's what they call Abraham.
Welcome to Bad Cousins, episode 2. I'm Ben Schumann-Stoller.
I'm Matan Kamener.
So, Matan, back in episode 1, we talked to Dana El-Kurd about the geopolitical circumstances that led to the Abraham Accords. And at the very end of the conversation, you asked Dana, if she thought there was anything significant about the fact that the Accords are named after Abraham, this guy in the Bible that everyone knows. And here's what she said.
Yeah, I mean, Abraham is like the father of the prophets, both Ishmael and Isaac, and Muslims coming from this and Jews coming from... I mean, as if the issue between Palestine and Israel and the rest of the Arab world has anything to do with the religions of these groups.
I mean, you could basically hear her head shaking as she was responding. Yeah. You could tell she's upset, that it's depressing to think about. You know, she said it's obfuscating. The idea of Abraham is obfuscating, and, you know, the conflict's about land. It's about self-determination and sovereignty, she said. It's obviously not about religion.
Yeah. And I think she has a point. Like, I think what was depressing to her was this idea that a religious conflict could never be resolved in any way, as opposed to a sort of secular human one. And I totally sympathize with that. There's also this other aspect to it, that there's, you know, this thick layer of ideological bullshit that's being smeared over the sort of hard realities that the Abraham Accords are representing. And Abraham is part of that. He's just part of the mix. So all of this is very good reason to be suspicious of what we're trying to do here. I mean, just now, in October 2025, as we're recording, Trump, with his latest sort of megalomaniac kind of a tour of the Middle East, is talking about Abraham again, about Abraham, right? And his so-called peace plan for Gaza that just came out has this point in it about an interfaith dialogue process based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff is like, it'll make your stomach churn, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the context of everything that's been happening.
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess my question then is, and what we're going to kind of frame the episode with is it just then Western politicians and, as we'll see, Christian ministers that are so excited about Abraham and sort of forcing that on the people in the Middle East? Or what do people on the ground, you know, in the Middle East themselves think?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. So on the one hand, there's a similarity. There are some theological continuities between people, Christians in the West, and Jews and Muslims. But on the other hand, there's also another aspect to it. So, okay, for Westerners, Abraham is this, you know, he's the father of monotheism, the patron saint of hospitality, universal icon, and all-around nice guy. But for people in the region, there's also another aspect to it.
Yeah, this family aspect, this cousinage that you want to talk about.
Right. So he's the father of 2 children, Isaac and Ishmael, and his grandkids are cousins.
Yeah. And okay, so today we'll get into all that in 2 ways. First, we're going to hear from ordinary people on the street in Jerusalem, Arabs and Jews, why they think they named the Accords after Abraham. And then I have some questions for you about the historical context and how this all is going down.
Cool.
So, Matan, you went with Guli, our producer, to the old city of Jerusalem earlier this year in 2025. And you met some Palestinians and Israelis, and you asked them, you just put a microphone on their face and asked them what they think of the Accords and why they were named after Abraham.
You know, the whole thing was kind of, I would say, spiritually challenging for me. Unfortunately, the old city, I don't know how you imagine it, but it's far from being any sort of sanctuary. It's more like a heavily militarized mall.
Yeah, well, that comes through in the interviews. And, you know, my first impression is that, I don't want to give away the bacon here, but the Israelis sound like they're on top of the world, right? This is during a ceasefire, one of the ceasefires in Gaza.
Right.
But the Palestinians, they're watching what they say, right? Mm-hmm. There's a few people that you tried to speak to who were afraid to speak openly.
Yeah.
They were afraid of being identified or being punished or losing their jobs.
Right.
You can tell the difference very clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those who did talk to us understood the Accords in a very, very different way from the Israelis. So here, for example, are some Israeli teenagers. The peace between Israel and the Arab countries.
Okay.
You know about the AHB-ra-hahm in Hebrew?
Yes.
Yeah? You know about it?
Yes.
What do you think about it? Is it good or bad?
Good.
Good,
Yeah.
Why?
Because we need a peace.
Yeah.
Because I love everyone.
Yeah, and this is a teenage Palestinian girl who was together with her grandmother.
What was the question again?
About the Abraham Accords. What do you think it's about, this peace treaty between Israel and the Emirates?
There is no peace between Israel and Palestine.
No,
No
but
peace.
with the
With the Netanyahu and his government, no peace.
But why do the Emiratis make peace with Israel?
What?
The Emiratis, why do they make peace with Israel?
I don't know.
It's
Tell
because
them.
they're just basically they want their own good. It's for their own good, especially not for the Palestinians themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that most countries in the world just want, like, they're basically selfish.
And another young Palestinian man. What do you think about it? Is it good or bad?
No, it's to be honest, it's for the Israeli side it's good, but for the Palestinian side and Arab side it's bad because you can't have an agreement when your brothers are being killed and being bombed every day.
Yeah.
Their children being bombed in Gaza,
Yeah.
and it's bad to be honest. They agree on getting tourists, but there are of course secret agreements that didn't show in public.
Right.
Like there could be, how do you say it, in money.
Now everyone, including Israelis, agreed that the Abraham Accords disproportionately benefit Israelis.
The Abraham Accords were a very positive thing.
Yeah.
It brought peace agreements between Israel and some of the other countries in the region. It made transportation easier. People could fly on Emirates and then come here. Good for the economy. Hopefully that path will continue.
So we see a really clear difference in the sort of general appraisal of the Accords, right? All the Israelis were in favor and all the Palestinians were pretty critical. But on the other hand, when we asked them a different question, that is why they're named after Abraham, everybody had the same answer. Why do you think they named the agreement after Abraham?
Maybe because one of his sons is a Jew and one is an Arab.
Yeah. What are their names? Do you remember?
Yeah, Yitzhak and Ishmael, Isaac and Ismail.
Okay. So why they named it after Abraham?
Because maybe they took this name of Abraham from the Bible.
Why is it
And
relevant?
as we are relatives
Uh-huh.
or cousins, they call it,
Uh-huh.
or whatever. That's why they mentioned the word Abraham.
What? We, you mean the Jews and the Arabs?
The Jews and the Arabs. Sometimes the Muslims, they call them our cousins.
The Jews call them cousins.
The Arabs call them cousins.
Why do you think they called them the Abraham Accords? Why are they named after
Well, because both the Muslims and the Jews are descended from Abraham.
Uh-huh.
So
Can you explain the story for our listeners who don't know it?
Okay, so Abraham had actually several children, sons, but the most important ones were Isaac and Ishmael.
Right.
So Ishmael is the ancestor of the Arabs, and Isaac is the ancestor of the Jews.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is relations between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have not always been the best, certainly not the best now.
Yeah.
But hopefully that the day will come when the brothers will be brothers, or at least cousins.
So this is all kind of amazing, right? Israelis and Palestinians are totally polarized around the politics of the Accords, as one would expect from hearing Dana talk about them. But they understand the symbol in the same way, as we said before, in this double way. Abraham is, on the one hand, the most important prophet, the symbol of the fear of God, but he's also the father of the Arabs and the Jews through his sons Ishmael and Isaac.
But so this thing that you're talking about, that even these highly polarized groups see the Accords in the same way when it comes to Abraham, that's like colloquial. That's like part of the culture.
Yes, absolutely. Arabs and Israeli Jews very commonly call each other cousins. So in Hebrew, the term is bnei dodim, while the Arabic equivalent is awlad am or ibn am or ibn amuma. They're all equivalent. For some reason, each side seems to think that the other side doesn't understand when they use this. It's like some sort of code word, but they do. That's what bad cousins are all about.
I really like this in your original paper that you quote a dictionary of Israeli slang.
A legendary dictionary of Israeli slang.
I didn't even know such a thing existed. It reminds me of
Urban Dictionary?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like the pre-Urban Dictionary.
It's like a Zionist urban dictionary or something.
It's the Zionist Urban Dictionary from the 50s.
But you said it defines this Hebrew word for cousins as, quote, a secret term for Arabs used in their presence, giving the following two usage examples. One, he is one of our cousins, but you can trust him 100%. And two, everyone on the bus is one of us, except two cousins in the back row.
Yeah, yeah.
That's incredible.
Just to sort of reiterate. So the point of this exercise was to prove to you that I wasn't just making any of this stuff up. That the whole cousins thing is a real thing. It's an immediately obvious thing to almost anybody that you ask in the Middle East.
All right. We're going to start talking through these different versions of Abraham, these different ideas of Abraham that you've hinted at and started to talk about, because we're going to talk about why the Accords were named after Abraham now. And again, as you've said a couple times, one is the Abraham who's the father of monotheism and like an idealistic father of all of humanity. And one is an Abraham who's the common father figure of the Jews and the Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, both of them are right there explicitly in the text itself of the Accords.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In fact, there's more than one agreement, and this is kind of important. On the one hand, there's the Declaration of Principles, I think it's called. That's the one that Donald Trump is, a signatory to with that crazy Sharpie scroll of his. And then there's separate agreements between Israel and each of the other countries that it signs the Accords with. And I think what is interesting in this regard is the difference between the Declaration of Principles on the one hand and the separate UAE-Israeli treaty on the other.
Yeah, so I'll just read it. The Abraham Accords Declaration is the one that Trump signed, as you said. And here's the quote. It says, "We encourage efforts to promote interfaith and intercultural dialogue to advance a culture of peace among the three Abrahamic religions and all humanity."
Right. So that discourse is also already really familiar, I think.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that was used already in the Gaza peace plan. But so this is the first explanation for the name of Abraham, right? Here, this Abraham figure is standing in for Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and also all of humanity.
Right, somehow.
Somehow. So where did this universal vision, this fantastic kind of idealistic idea of Abraham standing for all of humanity, where did that come from?
So that's a complicated question, obviously, but what we know from a book written by this journalist, Barak Ravid, Israeli journalist, about the Accords and from various other media, that the idea of the name came from this American general, Miguel Correa, who is a member of the National Security Council and was involved in the negotiations in various ways. Correa is a two-star general and a Catholic, which I think is not coincidental to the story. We'll see the Catholic background of this idea of Abrahamism, Abrahamic religions, etc. And he was quoted in the media in this article that I found saying the following: "All three of the religions have a different name for Abraham. It's translated in their religion. And we immediately make this people to people and religious rather than just a political agreement." So all three of the religions, that's, again, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity.
In other words, this is the idea that the figure of Abraham can bring all the monotheists together in harmony.
Right. Who all are also supposed to represent the entire world somehow, although not the entire world is monotheistic, of course.
There's more people in the world than just the Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And so there's already a paradox of like Abraham standing in for everyone in the world and like global peace, and the fact that there are, of course, other religions than the monotheistic ones.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's the declaration, right? That's the Abraham Accord declaration. There's also a peace treaty. This is the peace treaty between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And that was written by the Israeli negotiated Tal Bekkar.
Right, according to Barak Ravid.
Right. And so here's what it says there. It says, "Recognizing that the Arab and Jewish peoples are descendants of a common ancestor, Abraham, and inspired in that spirit to foster in the Middle East a reality in which Muslims, Jews, Christians, and peoples of all faiths, denominations, beliefs, nationalities live in and are committed to a spirit of coexistence, mutual understanding, and mutual respect."
Mm-hmm. So the second document has a different aspect in it, right? It has everything that the first one does, the Declaration of Principles, this monotheistic father of all humanity, blah, blah, blah. But it also starts with the father figure thing, right? The Arab and Jewish peoples are descendants of a common ancestor, Abraham. And I want to stick a pin in that because I think that's really weird, first of all. Why does this kind of language even appear in a diplomatic document, this language of common descent? And second of all, maybe contradicting myself, it's both weird, but it's also really, really obvious to, again, people in the Middle East, like we heard, like the people in the Vox Pop, right? Any of those Israelis or Arabs or Palestinians who had heard that would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I know that story.
So we've laid out the two
documents.
We've laid out the Accords, the two documents. There's the Declaration and there's the Peace Treaty. The Declaration of Principles and the Peace Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
So can we talk about Abraham as this like king of the monotheists, the first monotheist? Like, because before Abraham, everyone was pagan?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you had righteous men in the Bible before Abraham, like Noah, for example, right? But Abraham, I think, is significant for all three religions because he's the first one who explicitly reject idolatry, the first one to explicitly say no to polytheism. And there's this story about him breaking the statues, the idols, in his hometown of Ur in today's Iraq. So there's that. There's that aspect of being the ancestor. Well, no, not the ancestor, but the progenitor or the first one of the monotheistic religions. So it's important to keep the historical context in mind here, I think. People today will say, yeah, Abrahamic religions, that's a really kind of, old and obvious framework. But it's actually not. It's actually quite modern. And it's a particularly Catholic conception, which might surprise some people. It comes out of a very particular historical moment, which is the Vatican II Council in the early 1960s, which was this sort of big conference of the entire Catholic world, basically, in Rome.
Yeah, they met like multiple times over years.
Yeah. And so, in the Vatican City with all the pageantry and everything, and the atmosphere was really very heavily inflected by the Cold War, by this idea of communism in particular constituting a kind of godless materialism. And it was against this sort of threat that it was felt, that Catholic theologians felt, that they needed to close ranks with the other religions, right? At least maybe not all the other religions, but the two that we've been talking about next to Christianity, right? Judaism and Islam, and especially Islam. This is, again, might sound kind of surprising today, but in that period, Islam was generally seen in the West as was a force that could help push back communism and the sort of like left-wing nationalism that you had in the Third World, especially in places like Egypt, with Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was definitely not an Islamist, right? You had upcoming leaders who Westerners, the Western world, saw as potentially problematic, even if they weren't outright communists. Later it comes to the whole the Muslim Brotherhood being financed by the West, and all these stories with Bin Laden in Afghanistan that I think are pretty public knowledge by this point. But going back to the 60s, there was a feeling in the West, and especially in the Catholic Church, which was very involved in the Cold War, kind of ideological warfare, that they needed to get closer to the other churches, to the Protestants and the Eastern Orthodox, etc., but also to the Jews and particularly to the Muslims.
Right, and you wanted to talk about this French theologian, Louis Massignon. He had the ear of Pope John the 23rd, right? He was the Pope during this Second Vatican Council.
Yes, Louis Massignon. I think he was a very influential figure in this period. And he was maybe the major figure within the Catholic Church pushing this idea, particularly with regard to Islam. It's not that he had anything against Jews, but he was more interested in Islam and in Muslims, and bringing in this idea of cooperation with Muslims, and particularly bringing in the figure of Abraham as one to be venerated around that.
And so this is what you're saying is sort of the beginning of Abrahamism, the Abrahamic religions?
So the scholar Aaron Hughes says that Abrahamic religions comes out of Vatican II. I haven't studied the topic myself, but his argument is a convincing one.
Like what we're doing now is sort of tracing where does Abrahamism come from.
Right.
And you're saying it comes from Vatican II, which was a very controversial conference also. Some people thought it was like satanic to allow the mass to be done in the vernacular, right? That was like, it was a modernizing conference. There was a lot of pushback, but they felt like they had to make some kind of drastic changes in order, like you said, to fight for the good guys in the Cold War, so to speak, and also to sort of update the Catholic Church. Which
what you have is you have a period after World War II, on the one hand of declining church membership, decline, enthusiasm for Catholicism, which is, I mean, it's easy to understand why that would lead the church to try to make some compromises and to find some new allies.
I also know that Muslims have this idea of people of the book.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we're trying to be careful with concepts here and to try to separate them out from one another. So Abrahamic religions, that phrase, I think that comes out of Vatican II. That is not to say at all that Christians, Muslims, and Jews don't perceive their religions as being in some way related to each other, or that it has nothing to do with Abraham. Both of those would not be true claims to make.
Right.
People of the book, for example, that's one of the ways of understanding that. So within Islam, right, in Islam there is this kind of special status that Jews and Christians have, which is not at all the same status as Muslims. We're talking about Islamic polities, not all Islamic communities, but the states that have been ruled according to quote-unquote Islamic law in history. So in those sorts of states, Jews and Christians are supposed to have the right to practice their own religion, but they have to pay a special tax called the jizya. So that's one way of understanding them. We could also mention, for example, Maimonides. Rambam, the great Jewish rabbi of the medieval period, went to great distances to talk about Islam as a monotheistic religion as one that is not idol worshipping. So a Jew is okay walking into a mosque, for example. They're not participating in idolatry. He even ruled that it's all right to say Allahu Akbar, okay, which is just God is great. There's nothing a Jew should be objecting to in that phrase. So for him, for example, Christianity did not have that same status, right? So Islam had a higher status as being closer to Judaism than, and then you have Christian views of Islam and Judaism that are also another rabbit hole to go into.
Mentioning, I think, the long tradition of relation to each other, especially in the same region that we're talking about, is important, because I do think it's always important to remember, like, history happened. The Abraham Accords are part of something that is bigger than the moment, or a longer process. Yeah. The people that we haven't touched on yet would be the evangelicals. These are people that Trump invited to the White House lawn for the Abraham Accord signing, and definitely not Catholic, definitely not Muslim or Jewish. So what are they after with Abrahamic religions?
So their thing is actually more the sort of family drama, I would say. Evangelicals follow a certain form of theology called dispensationalism, which is basically, I mean, just to simplify things, a very literal reading of the prophecies in the Old Testament, as well as the New Testament, of course. So where the traditional Catholic or sort of mystical Christian understanding of various prophecies, like, a new temple will arise in Jerusalem, you'll have very, very sort of metaphorical or allegorical readings of that. But where the Hebrew Bible says there will be an Israelite king and he will start a temple, these people, actually like religious Zionists in a lot of ways, will read that in as literal possible manner and say, okay, well, what needs to happen in order for the Messiah to arrive is for the Jews to crown a king and to have a temple in Jerusalem. They're making these very sort of end times prophecies into basically an agenda, like a work plan.
In fact, on a recent podcast episode, Tucker Carlson quizzed Senator Ted Cruz, an evangelical, about this, and he explains his dispensationalism like this.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And again, this is something that both Messianic religious Jews in Israel, who are extremely powerful in Israeli politics at the moment, and evangelicals share. Of course, they don't share everything, because for the evangelicals, when the Messiah comes, that'll be Jesus coming back, and the Jews had better get on board with that or they're all going to hell.
Well, right. It's a strategy, I guess. Just to make sure I understand. When the Bible says Israel, they think like the modern state of Israel.
Yes, exactly.
Not like the tribe of Israelites.
Right.
And they also believe in these prophecies, like you said. And one of the things about the prophecies that you forgot to mention maybe is that making peace with its neighbors is a big part of that.
Right.
So staying on the Abraham Accords, this could be like a major step toward Jesus coming back. Is that for real?
Far be it for me to say yes or no to that question, but I think you're getting at an important point, and this is also important with regard to the previous discussion that we were having about whether this is all positive or negative. Yeah, I mean, these prophecies of the end of days, there's some really beautiful elements to them. The wolf shall lie down with the sheep, and they'll turn their swords into plowshares.
So, yeah, I mean, one way to recap that is like the belief in Abraham is not the cause of the Abraham Accords, right? Causes are political. But there's something about the nomenclature that's effective, because it's easy for people to fit that into the way they think about the region and the people who live in it. And one of those ways is that they're family, and that Abraham is like the patriarch of the family. And the other way is that they believe in religions that aren't quite the same, but both belong to this broader group that Christianity is also a part of. And that group is supposed to be a universal one that stands in for like human rights and intercultural dialogue and...
All that is true, but I think what makes it particularly effective is the fact that you don't even really need to realize any of this consciously. Like, most people never ask themselves why the Abraham Accords were named after Abraham. Not because they don't care, but because they think they already know the answer. It's obvious. But once you ask people that question, you see that you get all these different answers, right? You get different answers from Americans, different answers from Israelis, different answers from Arabs, as we saw when we went to Jerusalem to talk to people about this. And that's I think, kind of like the hallmark of a really effective symbol, that people think they know what it means, They take it up very, very quickly. But in fact, they're all thinking about very different things.
Yeah. I mean, I, for one, believe in the Zoroastrian priests who said that Abraham's teacher was Duhag, the snake god who eats babies' brains.
You should watch out for the Zoroastrians.
As far as I know, that's real. I'm not making fun. I just think it's amazing that Abraham is a figure for so many different people, even beyond the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians.
Wait, is that Duhak thing actually, does it have anything to do with Abraham?
As far as I understand it, like, you know, you ask yourself the question, how did this man become righteous? He was chosen, obviously, in the tradition, right?
Okay.
Well, according to the Zoroastrians, he wasn't chosen. He was infected, kind of, by this Doeg, snake god.
Okay, if you say so.
He wasn't blessed by God, by the Old Testament God who opened his eyes to the monotheism.
Okay, if we have any Zoroastrian listeners who want to come in here and correct Ben on this, we'd be happy for that.
Please do. All right, but next time we're going to talk about cousinry, and we'll talk to an anthropologist who's not you, but a different anthropologist about the politics, the relationship that you like, because you saw one tweet that said cousins are a funny amount of related to you.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that next time. This was Bad Cousins, episode 2. I want to say thanks again to everyone for the feedback and responses to episode 1. Thanks for sharing that around. We really appreciate it. And likewise, everyone who came out to our event in Berlin. It was so cool to see people in person. We had a great panel chat. We had a good time hanging out afterwards also. We hope to do more of that. So you can keep up with all our events, get some extra context, some extra writing from me and Matan at the Colo Media channels on Instagram or our newsletter. You can go to badcousins.show. You can go to colomedia.com. We also started a Patreon page for Colo Media where you can support this show and our other work with a few bucks a month, which would be hugely appreciated. We also want to, of course, say thanks to our media partners, The Diasporist. Follow them on all the channels. Their Instagram is awesome. Also, Laba and Kunstlerhaus Battanian for the event that they helped host. This episode was written by Matan Kamener and me, Ben Schumann Stoller. Our producer is Guli Dolev Hashaloni, music by Adam Maor. And thanks again to all those Matan and Guli spoke to in the Old City of Jerusalem. We'll be back in a few weeks for episode 3 of Bad Cousins.
The series is about the Abraham Accords, the peace agreement between Israel and
if it's politics, I'd rather not speak. Although I'm Armenian, but
we're also interested in the Prophet Abraham.
Okay.
And we want to try to understand why they call the agreement the Abraham
Once
agreement.
you understand, let me know.
You don't know?
Okay. I wish you recorded that.